Hello and welcome back to Reading Sisters. Today I, Naomi, will be reading Part 3 of The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin, Rest in Power, A Parent Story of Love, Injustice, and the Birth of a Movement by Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. Okay. Now, last time we read this, we started chapter 1. So, I'm aiming to get close to finishing it. Now, I'm going to take off this cover because I'm not very fond of these. So we are going to start on page 11 today. By the time Trayvon was 9, he had begun calling me Cupcake because he said, "You're so sweet." He wanted to do everything for me. If I was sick, he wanted to be my doctor. When I was tired, he wanted to be the cook. He could already make breakfast and soon dinner. He carried grocery bags, moved furniture, cleaned the house, babysat his young cousins, washed my car, everything. Sometimes I would even pretend that I couldn't do things just to give him a chance to do the work he loved. He would tell me with his smile, "I've got it, Cupcake." He was a mama's boy, always with me, always affectionate, kissing and hugging me, sitting beside me, walking alongside me, and holding my hand. But as he grew, his world expanded. He would introduce himself to everyone who crossed his path and dub them a friend. I always taught my son the importance of good manners. Once, when I took Trayvon and Javiers to visit my mom and dad, Trayvon rushed in and just started talking like he had been there the entire time. No good evening, how are you, just talking, a blue streak. I marched him right back outside the door. "You will not come into my mother's house without speaking," I told him. And I made him make his entrance all over again, this time saying good evening, how are you this evening? Whatever he did, with all of his heart and his soul. He didn't just ride his bike. He had to build a ramp on which he would ride on the bike fast so the bike would take him high into the air. He played football for 2 youth teams, basketball, wrestling, and played drums in the school band. When he turned 14 and his junior league football days were over, he kept going to the park. He worked at the concession stand with his father who ran it, but he also worked with younger kids at the park, making sure they had their uniforms, helping them get on the field on time. Whatever else he could until I had to say, "Trayvon, we have to go home now." 2 summers before his death, Trayvon found his future in Opelika, at the airport near our home. That summer, he joined Experience Aviation, a summer camp founded by the legendary pilot Barrington Irving. Irving was raised in the inner city, Miami, and in 2007, at age 23, became the first black pilot to fly solo around the world. Miami to Miami. The flight took 97 days and 26 stops to complete. He designed this summer camp to help kids become more knowledgeable about aviation, and through aviation build their skills in other areas, including reading, math, and science. One day at the camp, Trayvon sat in a cockpit of Barrington's Irving Globe-trotting airplane. When he came home, he still had stars in his eyes. "Mom, I know what I'm going to do," he told me. He had decided on a career in aviation, either as mechanic because he could fix anything, or as a professional pilot. He couldn't decide which, except he was determined to be around planes. He was a child of Miami, Florida, the great melting pot of nations: whites, Africans, Americans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Haitians, Bahamians, South Americans, Chinese, Vietnamese. People from all over the world call Miami home. We taught Trayvon to respect the way an African American, but that was never all he was. We sent Trayvon Martin into the world not as a young black man, but as a young man. By the time he was 17, Trayvon was 140 pounds and almost 6 feet. He was a typical Miami teenager, eager to do everything all at once. He'd already seen a world outside Miami. I'd taken so they would they could call a white Christmas. And we'd recently been to New York, where Trayvon fell in love with the Statue of Liberty, Times Square, and the Empire State Building, and he saw his first Broadway play. He was very particular about his clothes and his appearance, his haircut, his cologne, and most of all, his shoes. He collected Air Jordans, though I couldn't afford to buy a new pair of 100 to 200 shoes every time a new style released. If you can earn money, I'll take you to get the shoes, I would tell him. He went to work, doing odd jobs for family members and friends, washing cars, cutting grass, trimming hedges, pulling weeds, babysitting, until he had enough for those shoes. Sometimes, if he fell short, I would pay the difference, and Trayvon would stand in line from 6 a.m. until the store opened at 10, because he always had to be the first to get whatever was new. When he said he wanted the new 80 a bottle icy milk Mayak cologne, I drew the line for a simple reason. It was too expensive. Instead, I gave him a bottle as a birthday gift when he turned 17 on February 5th, 2012. 2 weeks after that, we celebrated my birthday by going horseback riding. We were all beginners, but Trayvon, who had only ridden ponies before, led our group as if he had been riding all of his life. I can still hear him calling his friends to tell them about the horseback riding on his ever-present cell phone. He kept earbuds in his ears at all times because he could use them to listen to music or talk on the phone, and he rarely removed his gray or black hoodie, which he wore spring, summer, winter, and fall, even though Miami really only was one season, hot. At first, I didn't like the hoodie, and would tell him to take it off. It was something that teenagers were wearing that I wasn't used to. Hoodies weren't in style when I was growing up, but Trayvon, who felt he was making a fashion statement, would rarely remove it. So once I realized that all the teenagers were wearing them, I was okay with it. As he got deeper into his teens, his teachers generally found him pleasant and smart. But there were some dark clouds too. Problems began just before the start of his 11th grade school year, when I transferred him from Miami Carroll City Senior High, a school he loved, to a good schooler closer to our house, Dr. Michael M. Kropp Senior High. Away from the teachers and friends who'd been his community for years, he didn't always apply himself at Carroll City in advanced classes. He had been a B and C student at Kropp. He was making C's and D's by the fall of 2011. School seemed to take a back seat to everything else that was happening in Trayvon's life. His haircut, his clothes, his social activities, going to parties, and of course, girls. He lost focus. I keep telling myself that these were typical ups and downs lots of teenagers go through, that Trayvon was still the same person I'd known for his whole life. And he was a good kid. Still, Tracy and I started to worry. He started missing classes, and the entire school days. When he would show up to school, he would frequently be late. The school receptionist would call the house, report his absences. At first, they would reach my older brother Ronnie, who, after being left a quadriplegic in an automobile accident many years ago, he had come to live with us like all of us. Ronnie adored Trayvon, who helped him take care of him, frequently cooking meals and feeding him. So when the school called to report tardiness and absences, Ronnie would cover for Trayvon, and word never got back to me. When I finally caught wind of the calls, I started talking to Trayvon to school myself, which strangely he liked. It gave us a chance to talk about small things, but the sort of talk the teenagers need in order to feel a connection to their moms, to be reminded of their gentle, familiar intimacy of family during a time of tough transitions. But our time was always short. Hurry, Trayvon, let's go, I was forever saying, because I needed to hurry to get to work on time. Like so many mothers I've met, the shortage was never love or concern or desire. But time was short. Trayvon was still finding his share of trouble. In February 2012, he was disciplined for being in an unauthorized area of the school and writing WTF on a locker in the school hallway. When the security guards searched his backpack, they found a screwdriver, which they called a burglary tool. and some woman jewelry rings and earrings. Trayvon admitted the jewelry wasn't his because he wouldn't tell the administrator who it belonged to. He received a 10-day suspension from school. This had gone far. When he came home, I sat him down. We were in the living room on the sofa, me on the love seat, me dressed for work, him in everyday jeans and polo shirt, me demanding answers, him quiet and very careful with his words because he knew I was upset, and even worse, disappointed in him. "Why did you have it?" I asked him about the jewelry. "Where did it come from?" I tried to stay calm, but I'm sure my voice was licked with tension. He said it belonged to a friend whose name he wouldn't reveal and would never reveal to me or to the school administrators. I was always impressed on Trayvon and his brother, the importance of making comments and common sense decisions, and this didn't make sense. This was much bigger than skipping school. I needed to know why. "Where did you get this?" I asked again, my voice rising. "From a friend," he said. "What's the friend's name?" He looked away and said nothing. The silence between us lingered for a few moments. "You're going to have to be more responsible," I said finally. "I know," he said. "If you keep getting suspended, you're not going to graduate on time," I said. "And if you don't graduate, you're going to have to stay in school for an extra year." "Oh no, Mom, I want to graduate," he said. "Well, then you need to work hard and stay out of trouble," I said. "You need to stop doing whatever all those other kids are as associating with what they're doing." "Well, I'll just be myself," he said. And I said, "That sounds like a good plan." For the first few days of his suspension, he was at home, and my mother, brother, and Aunt Leon kept him busy doing odd jobs. For the second week of the 10-day suspension, he was set to go on a trip with his father to Stanford, Florida, a city around 50,000 people just outside Orlando. Tracy was going to Stanford to attend a convention this week. Before he was to leave for Stanford, Trayvon grew tired of all the odd jobs that were lining up for him. He was ready to get out of Miami, so Tracy, who had to work and couldn't drive up to Stanford until Friday, suggested that Trayvon go on a few days earlier than him and spend time with Tracy's girlfriend, Brandy, and her son, Chad. Tracy thought it might do Trayvon some good to go with him to Stanford, and said he would use the opportunity to talk with Trayvon's father to son, to get him back on the right track before he went back to school the following week. Trayvon, eager to get out of the house and into a new place with new friends, agreed. On the night of February 21st, a Tuesday, my youngest brother Mark and I drove Trayvon to Greenhound bus station so he could catch the 5-hour multiple stop ride from Miami to Orlando. The nearest stop to Sanford, where Brandy could pick him up and take him to the earbuds, as always in his ears. He was wearing a new pair of basketball shoes, Kahai pants, sweatshirt, and his gray hoodie. "I love you. See you later," I said, kissing him goodbye. "Love you too, Mom," he said as he exited the car and disappeared into the bus station. We were almost back home when my cell phone rang. "I missed the bus," Trayvon said. "What?" He gave me some story about how he walked from the station for a moment, and when he came back, the bus to Orlando was gone. "Do you not want to go?" I said. "No, no," he said. He wanted to go. "Can you come back and get me?" he asked. I was frustrated that he's missed the bus. What did he have to do other than wait for the bus to come? But I didn't say anything to him about it. I just turned the car around and drove back to get him since there wasn't another bus to Orlando that night. We drove him back home by 10 p.m. We were fast asleep, and 7 a.m. we were awake up sitting around the breakfast table. As always, I had to get to work, so after breakfast, I drove Trayvon to Tracy's house, and Tracy took him back to the Greenhound station. That was Wednesday, February 2012 house. I rushed off to work, still feeling a low vibration of anxiety about how Trayvon's journey would go. Whether Tracy would get a chance to talk, whether Trayvon would return to school on Monday with his head on straight like he promised me he would, ready to shake off these seatbacks and move forward with his studies and his dreams. All the things we talked so much about. I have no idea that would be the last time I would ever see my son alive. 5 days later, I got the call from Tracy. Trayvon, he began, his voice breaking, is gone. So, now we're going to pause at this chapter and I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about why or what is going to happen next. So I had to go for a little bit. That's why I have paused the footage. But I am back, and we are just going to read the last two sentences. 5 days later, I got the call from Tracy. Trayvon, he began, his voice breaking, is gone. So we finished chapter 1, and I'm deciding whether we should read. So this book does have a table of contents. So we will go in front and check it. It ends page 34, so we'll read a little bit of chapter 2. Chapter 2, Tracy. February 26, 2012. February 27, 2012. Sometimes I still see him running across a public park football field, his shoulder pads too big for his slim frame, but his spirit large enough to make up the difference. The Optimism Football Club would retire his jersey, number 9, but one team wears it on the back of their helmets as a reminder of the friend and the teammate they lost. I still go to that field all the time. I run the Optimist football program as a volunteer, and while I know it's not my son, I see Trayvon running across the field again and every kid there. I think of them all as my sons, and my responsibility to them goes beyond football. I'm there to help them, guide them, and do my best to make sure that what happened to Trayvon won't happen to them. I sometimes wonder, what if Trayvon hadn't been killed? What he have become? But those questions are pointless, unanswerable. All I can do now is remember all that he was to me, the son I considered my best friend. I love you, I told Trayvon on that day that he died. He had called me to ask for the phone number for the local pizza delivery service. Do you have enough money for pizza? I asked him, just to make sure that Trayvon and Chad had money left over from what I had given him earlier. Yes, we've got enough, he told me. I love you, Trey, I remember saying. I always make it to tell my kids or my significant other, hey, I love you. Whenever we are going to be apart, it gives me some comfort to know what the last words I said to him before he died were. I love you. And that his last words to me were, Dad, I love you too. I was born in Miami, but raised in East St. Louis, Illinois. The Mississippi River separates East St. Louis, Illinois from St. Louis, Missouri, and although the two cities are separated by less than a mile, there are many words apart. I grew up in Roosevelt Homes Project on 44th Street on Buckingham Road. The first thing that was instilled in me was to be patient, careful, and respectful to everyone I met, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because it could be the difference between life and death. The sound of gunshots was as common as the sound of car horns on those streets, and the neighborhood was a hot spot for gangs. So you could have to respect the people, the territory you were in, and the constant potential for violence. Coming from where I did, the sight of a dead boy or a crime scene was hardly news, until one day it was my son, whose body was surrounded by the yellow police investigating tape. I've known death before. Both of my parents are deceased. I've had friends shot and killed, relatives who passed away young from accidents and disease. This was all part of growing up in East St. Louis. But even then, nothing compares to the loss of a child. It's a different level of hurt than anyone I've known. A hurt that sears your mind, body, and soul that never subsides. My father's side of the family lived in Miami, so I often visit when I was young. But my heart was set on staying with my mother and my family in East St. Louis, where I was the youngest of 4 boys. East St. Louis, where I was the youngest of 4 boys. Oh, sorry, I repeat that sentence. East St. Louis is a small city, almost 99% black, and surrounded by predominantly white suburbs, so there were certain areas where we knew we couldn't go. I've been called nigger by passing people in passing cars as I walked along the roads of East St. Louis, and I remember seeing handwritten signs saying "No Negros" all loud. Some people argued the racism goes both ways, that it affects everyone, and maybe that's true. However, African Americans are more often on the receiving end of it, and black boys catch the majority of its hell. When I become a parent, I would tell my sons, hey, racism is still alive and well, and you have to watch out for it all the time. Well, the subject of racism is a conversation that America struggles to have. We as African Americans have to have this conversation all the time. My mother always advised her kids, if you see somebody coming at you with any kind of racism, run. I remembered my mother's advice when I was around 14. While I was walking with some friends, a car full of white young men passed by. They threw bottles at us and called us negres. We kept walking. The next thing you know, that we saw the car coming back, and my mother's words came back to me in a hurry, run. And that's what we did. So just like my mother told me, I told my kids, including Trayvon, if you see yourself about to get into a racial confrontation, eliminate yourself from the equation. Run, because the confrontation isn't worth it. Run, because the confrontation may escalate. Don't stop to discuss it. This is not the time to have a conversation about race. If you have to protect yourself, do so. But if you can, just run. Why run? My mother was from the South Side, so she knew what racists were capable of. Racial terrorism was still going strong where we was growing up in the civil rights era. From her running from racist acts, when the racists you are running from might be law enforcement, civil leaders, or even elected officials, made all sense in the world. As for me, I was raised in all black East St. Louis, an island of poverty and violence, surrounded by affluent white suburbs. Racial tension ran high. No matter what progress had been made, there was no changing how some people felt about us. And while we didn't have to worry about the Klan in East St. Louis, I knew good and well that if there was a racial confirmation, no matter the right and wrong of it, the black person involved would be saddled with the premonition of guilt. Running made sense to me too. A generation later, I had to give my sons same instructions my mother gave me. Progress is sometimes hard to find, and it was better for them to be aware so they could protect themselves and extract themselves from the situation simply by running from it. I'm a truck driver now, which might not sound like a dream job, but even as a kid, I always fascinated by truck driving and sports, especially basketball. My friends and I always said that basketball was going to take us out of the ghetto, and I was pretty good at it. I wanted to play in college, but my grades weren't up to par, so I started focusing on work at a very young age, never even considering a college education. I passed through a very variety of jobs, but I really didn't have any goals set at the time. I got into some trouble at a young age, hustling to get some money in places where money was hard to find, being young and hungry and angry all at once. I wasted years. I knew I had to look from a different way of life. My oldest brother, Willie Mike Williams, was driving a truck for Miami-Dade County Solid Waste Management in Miami, convinced me to leave East St. Louis. It was a hard decision, but in March 1993, I made a permanent move to Miami. The day I arrived in Miami, my brother Trayvon Martin took me job hunting. And that's how I landed my first job in Miami, working as a glass carving and prices. As a laborer in the glass factory warehouse within the year, I was promoted to driving a truck delivering glass across to South Florida. I'd finally found some stability. So that will be all for today of Rest in Power by Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. And I have posted part 1 and 2 of The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin, Rest in Power by, already I said, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. It would mean a great deal to me and my sister if you would please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell If you watched all the way to this video, make sure you subscribe down below. Comment comment down below anything. Just comment anything you can describe Trayvon as. From only knowing what I have read. Comment down below anything you think you can understand or think of about Trayvon, and just comment it down below. And thank you for watching. I'm going to say this one more time. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to see our latest videos. Thank you for watching.